Hello, and welcome to another month of Weekly Shonen Jump. We are kicking off 2025, the second year of this program. Oh god, what am I doing? Uh-oh. We are experiencing some technical difficulties. We're back! Yeah, this is my second year now of doing these monthly roundups. The actual 1 year anniversary will be in April, but I still feel like that's a pretty exciting milestone. You know, the year changed. And this first month, wow, things got off to a pretty hectic start in our beloved magazine. Only 3 chapters because of all of the New Year's holidays, but those 3 chapters contain some insane bangers. Since this is the first time I have been reading the whole magazine like this in January, I don't know, maybe this is a common thing to treat January almost like sweeps week, where all of the mangaka are trying to go extra hard, maybe both taking advantage of the fact that their schedule suddenly has a bit more breathers in them to really crank out some top-level chapters. Also seeming to coincide major plot developments happening around then. Maybe they know readership is higher over the holidays, and this is a chance to hook some new people with some really awesome dramatic content. But as you'll see, yeah, a lot of the series we're going to talk about, I feel like, are on their A game or even their S game. And on top of that, we had 2 long-running series that hit over 200 chapters conclude in this month over those 3 chapters, which is crazy. Very, very eventful times, and where there are endings, there are also new beginnings, so I'm sure we're going to see some brand new series crop up soon too, which is always exciting. So yeah, very interesting times for the magazine. I'm excited to share all of that with you. Let's plunge in. We're first going to talk about Witch Watch. The previous few months of Witch Watch saw it have one of its famous genre shifts back to really intense battle shonen, perhaps some of the most intense so far. There was death, there was destruction, there was battling, there was Joan of Arc resurrected as a flaming knight bent on revenge. So we kind of had all of that stuff wrap up at the beginning of the chapter, or the beginning of the month's chapters, in a way that I found pretty compelling. They didn't just kind of leave it as, okay, now you know what happened, and we are roughly where you were before. But there was some new information gained about kind of what the end game of the series will look like, what this very ominous danger of the witch Jura really is. This idea that she has a... Jura, I think, yeah. She has like a true name, which is like a curse that no one can hear, you know? We can kind of see the seeds of future plot developments happening. But then we were also given the promise that said plot developments are going to come after another long window of peace, where we will return to the wacky, fun, sitcomish adventures. I really like when the series does this. It's such like a explicit thing to do, beyond what most series will do in terms of like signaling to the readers what they can expect. The series just straight up has the narrator say, look forward to another window of peace. Look forward to more fun, wacky adventures. It's really strange because it makes you wonder, why don't they just abandon the battle shonen aspects at all? Why don't they just abandon the lore altogether? And partially, I guess it's because they set it up, so they gotta pay it off. It would be really weird if they actually did just totally forget about it, and the series ends without any of that stuff being concluded. And then I guess probably some part of the readership really wants that to happen. That's the stuff they're actually most invested in. That's kind of hard to imagine at this point, but maybe those people are out there. And I think also it just kind of creates this very interesting, like, emotional mood where when we have all these wacky chapters and these silly, fun, slice of life antics and just get to know the characters and relax, it feels all the more precious because we've been told, hey, this is a window of peace, enjoy it. Battles will come again later. Maybe bad things will happen. Maybe people are in danger. And it's just sort of like putting you in that space where it's like, okay, I'm going to be reading this week by week and having a big laugh, but eventually maybe the day will come when things get tense again. It creates like a more precious feeling around all of it. So yeah, we had all that wrap up. We had the announcement of the Window of Peace, and then of course we had two wacky fun chapters. One where Momochi, the older lady that helps them out sometimes, gets gigantified, which actually had a lot less fan service than I expected. Oh, there was some. Don't worry, there was some. But I really thought they'd go further in that direction. That was kind of surprising. And then in the most recent chapter, I think something that gets really at the core of Witch Watch, you know, it's a scenario where Nico uses a new spell. It has some great effects, but then, of course, something goes wrong. Here, I really like the idea where it's like, it just creates the sensation of water, so you can just swim in air. Your body just experiences being immersed in water, even though it's just, there's no water. Very, very clever, very evocative. It does kind of feel like a fantasy that you may not even articulate, or something that happens to you in a very strange dream. And then, of course, she mixes up water level 100 centimeters with water level 100 meters, and now suddenly they're swimming around way, way up in the sky, and scary, scary. The crisis was resolved very, very quickly, very briefly. But it's all good. Nice, fun idea. And I like that they brought back this girl, too. The other witch around Nico's age that's like a TV star and stuff. I think she's a fun character. And now that she's had her little arc, I'm glad that she's in kind of this sitcomist rotation where we can have a chapter that focuses on her now and again. So we'll give it an A+ for the month. The typical grade for Witch Watch. Love the series. It's still killing it. Let's go. Next, let's talk about the Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi. The last month was really boiled deep within a training arc, which got wrapped up at the start of this month. I like that they call out specifically, the way we're going to train you is by making you repeatedly have near-death experiences. Because that's such like a cliche in shonen and stuff. You know, I was pushed to the very, very brink, to my limit. And because I survived that innately, I just became all the more strong. This is a series that's like, hey, well, if that's the case, why don't we take advantage of this? Why don't we just repeatedly push you to being 1% away from death and just trigger that sensation over and over and over again? I thought that was very novel, very fun. Then we had kind of more of slice of life stuff in anticipation of the next big arc, the Black Parade, which I'm sure is going to be starting in the very next chapter. They really keep the pacing brisk with this, you know? It's a nice blend of like really savoring in certain arcs. Like the training arc was fairly substantial, and you got to see the setting, and you got to be introduced to all these characters. But when it's time to kind of like transition and start building up the next plot points, they're very efficient about just like getting to the destination, getting to the next major events in a way that I appreciate. It cuts out all of the typical sources of tedium in a shonen series like this. But yeah, the slice of life stuff was fun. It was nice to have a little bit of sentimentality, some really wholesome moments. I like Kiyoshi, his social side, making friends, trying to have typical young person experiences, all the awkwardness that entails, but in a really positive way too. It's never that he's like getting bullied or whatever. It's things always work out better than he expects. A whole bunch of cool characters being introduced on the allies side, which I'm sure will be matched by equally cool designs for all the demons we're gonna see soon. Yeah, this is all going great. I am becoming more and more of a fan of the series. I feel like it still hasn't broken through to the level of like really blowing my mind and really making me super invested, but it's just so solid. It's just so well done. The art style is so great. All the character designs are so great. The fight scenes are great. I'm just like chilling, man. We're just like rolling along steady. It's good stuff. It'll get an A for the month. Next, we're going to talk about Sid Craft Love is a Mystery. It kicked off its first kind of proper arc, investigating a potential bombing on a cruise ship. It's fine. I hold cruise ship arcs to like a high standard. The one in Spy Family, really good. Very similar. I think really, really good, though. And now there's one starting in Sakamoto Days that we'll talk about in a bit that so far has been really good. Whereas this, I feel like they wanted to kind of take a step towards arc writing and more of a substantial plot line. But they just didn't really have too many ideas. The actual like mystery was solved pretty quickly. The twists were quite generic. The kind of final puzzles and stuff weren't all that interesting either. It's becoming clear, like, this series was juggling sort of the comedy aspect of this idea of the great detective that hates mysteries, the mysteries themselves, making this an actual solving cases series, and then the rom-com elements where it's a little fan servicey at times, and it's all about who will he end up with, what progress gets made where, blah, blah, blah. And it's becoming more and more apparent which ones of these are just an excuse to do the other ones, you know what I'm saying? And more it's like, oh, the mysteries and stuff, that's just sort of a means to an end. It's really about the rom-com elements and the fan service. I don't know. That's maybe a little too cynical. They are trying to set up greater mysteries. This whole idea of Zero Craft, which is like the long-term antagonist, who may also be romantically interested in Sid Craft. I don't know what's going to happen there. I'm sure they won't pass up an opportunity to have another attractive girl character that can do various semi-lewd things. Yeah, I don't know. It's all starting to feel a little pedestrian. Like, what impressed me at the start of the series is that the mysteries, I thought, were actually pretty well done. Like, there was genuine clues that if you were eagle-eyed and reading the manga or had the gift of foresight or something, you would be like, oh, wait, no, that's off. Or, oh, that's signaling back to this other thing. It was at a great level where when the reveal came and Sid Craft explains everything, you have this nice sensation of like, oh yeah, no, I was showing that. That's right. And now it feels like that element is kind of falling away. There hasn't been an interesting case in a little while. So I hope they can bring back some of that energy. But again, it may be that all of that was just a pretense to get the rom-com element going. So we'll see. For now, I will give it a B. This month it was fine, it was solid, but not really all that interesting. Okay, we'll talk about a super psychic policeman, Chojo. This is a fairly typical month, 2 out of the 3 chapters were just your gag manga shenanigans. The cursed plushie that takes over the station was very fun. I like the gimmick where all sorts of like typical horror tropes are happening, strange disturbances, unexplained phenomenon due to the cursed plushie. But then because they have somebody with telekinesis, everyone is just going, oh, well, you're doing that. Chojo's doing that. He's just messing with us. It's Chojo's fault. I thought that was a funny intersection. I hadn't seen a joke made like that before. I like that his psychic powers are like not really that relevant to the story very often, as is typical in gag manga. That sort of thing falls by the wayside. But then when they do choose to kind of like return to the premise in such a way, it's usually just to make Chojo's life worse, which I find like really funny. And then this week there was karaoke adventures. I love karaoke. I was just at karaoke last night. So I like any chapter that's about karaoke. Makes me kind of envious because it's clear that karaoke occupies way more of a cultural force in Japan than it does here. In fact, last night there was somebody that was like surprised to hear that I go to karaoke as often as I do. And it's like, well, yeah, I've got like a lot of Filipino friends. I've got, friend groups that are very like karaoke focused. But even those friend groups aren't doing karaoke as much as like just random people in Japan. Anyways, yeah, karaoke, fun. I like that everyone sucked. Normally these stories go that one person is like gifted and talented and it creates all of the subsequent complexes and stuff. But here, all of our main characters were just bad at singing. And then the month started off with a chapter that I found very frustrating because the legendary series Kochekame, which ran in Jump for 40 years, the longest running series in Jump, one of the longest running manga of all time, period. A series that, very tragically, I don't think I'll ever get to read in full, because who the hell is going to be able to scanlate all of that? Viz doesn't seem to be interested in going back and doing it officially. Anyways, that legendary cop came out of retirement to do a collab chapter with Chojo, which is a real honor. That's a real amazing thing for this this silly gag comedy to get. You know, a real passing of the torch from generation to generation, from one silly cop series to another. And I would have loved to read it, but for some reason Viz did not translate it. Although they did translate that issue's chapter of Shoujo, which was all about the Kojikame crossover. It was all about the characters freaking out that it actually happened, and that he came to their police station, and wasn't he so cool, and he really lives up to all the stories. It gives Chojo a complex. It's very funny. It's a funny chapter, but the whole time I was like, I want to read that. I want to read Kochikame, for that matter. My Japanese is good enough to read manga now, but it takes me a long time. It takes me a good, like, 10-15 minutes per page, depending on how much text there is. And indefinitely more if there's some text on there that I just don't understand, and I gotta do a ton of research. And it's like, if I'm gonna try to read Kochikame at this speed, I will die first. There's like so many chapters. There's 200 volumes. So something's got to change. I either got to get better at Japanese, or some miraculous thing has to happen where Viz goes, we're going to start going back through Kochikame and licensing all of it. But I doubt it. Anyways, yeah, good stuff. Giving an A- for the month. I just wish I could read that Kochikame chapter. The crossover. It sounds so fun. Alright, let's talk about Shinobi Undercover, the series I have been feeling kind of mixed on, where it has some moments where it feels like they're really cooking. There's some wheelhouses that it can play in where it has a lot of strength. But it also just has like a lot of strange, embarrassing things and really unnecessary elements. We had the finale of a fight that was going on last month that kind of mixed, you know, the fight scenes, which I think are actually pretty good and have good choreography, a good sense of physicality and danger and strength. But then this like running joke of the guy he's fighting being able to make cool quips and our protagonist not being able to make cool quips. It creates like a really weird tone where at once we're expected to like really care about what's happening and feel compelled by the characters being in peril and all this stuff, while at the same time just kind of like riffing with these jokes that aren't even like unfunny, but it's just kind of like, why? It reminds me of Kill Blue. I think Kill Blue is also very awkward for this, and it's kind of like, okay, well, you can look at One Piece. One Piece is full of extremely intense emotional climaxes that also have really goofy stuff going on. But it's different when it's like inherently kind of like goofy fights that end up being way more serious and compelling than they seem on paper, versus a pretty typical fight that just has people like making jokes in the middle of it. Like those two things are very, very different. And it feels odd to me that, you know, the formula for like a comedy battle series that has wacky things but emotional tension had been figured out for like decades, and now, I don't know, maybe manga as well has been quip poisoned. We're seeing all these series where instead of having like really inventive wacky fights, it's like pretty typical fights, but the characters are just like riffing. And it's like, this isn't as good, man. Why why didn't you just do the thing that's worked? Anyways, then there was some kind of moments of sincerity that I thought were actually pretty good. It felt like our characters are getting more real. It feels like they're engaging with the whole premise of the series in a way that's actually kind of empathetic and gets at the human element of it. You know, this idea that her entire life is sort of this stage play where undercover ninjas are pretending to be her friends and all these other people around her in her life while actually secretly keeping her safe. And that's pretty fucked up, right? And at first I kind of felt like the series was just going to sweep that under the rug. Like, okay, well, that's your premise. It is what it is. But more and more, they're kind of leaning into this idea of like, wow, her life is like so fucked. Her sense of reality is so strange, and her relationships with people are so artificial, and that's tragic. And what can we do about that? And it's like kind of interesting, and it makes me care about the characters a lot more. And then, again, leaning into this premise, they went in the latest chapter in a direction I found really stupid and really kind of offensive to these very same ideas, where they introduced like an ikemen playboy handsome guy who's another undercover ninja that's supposed to be helping protect her. But of course he's like a real jerk, and he starts fighting with our MC right away. And this is all in the aftermath of the MC realizing he has feelings for her, and it's like, oh, this is creating a love rivalry and blah blah blah. The thing that bugs me about it is that it's like, in the end, obviously it's going to be that she doesn't really like this guy, and all of his superficial charm bounces right off her, and the fact that he's very objectifying and misogynist turns her off, and blah blah blah. And this is going to be like a moment of catharsis, sure, but it's like having that be the, not even like the twist, but like the contrast only works because they've shown that all of the other girls are like charmed by him, and that this is like the one person he couldn't conquer. And it's like, well, that in itself kind of feels misogynistic. All the other girls fall for his tricks, but not our main girl. She's different. She's cool. Okay, but what about all those other girls? Are they just stupid? Are they that shallow? Are they that easily duped? It seems so. I don't know. It's often, I find that plot lines involving with this sort of character fall into this sort of trap, because they need to show, like, this guy isn't delusional, his charms are like the real deal. But then in doing so, it's like, no, but you made him so obnoxious. How could his charms be real? What is wrong with all these other women? I don't know. So that I was like rolling my eyes at. We'll see where it goes. But it's like, they just need to stick to what they're good at. They don't need to freaking have all these quips. They don't need to have like all of this kind of like school hierarchy of archetypes and how they play out stuff, because I think they're bad at it. It's not interesting. It's kind of offensive. Just stick to like good fight choreography and character exploration. And the character exploration is better than I thought it would be. There's like potential strengths in this series, but man, they're making them hard to find. I'll give it a C+. It's doing okay. But we'll see where this goes. Alright, Sakamoto Days. Banger. We are continuing the flashback of when Shin met Mr. Sakamoto for the first time. This is fun because it really kind of gets back to the core of Shin's character. You know, it's just like Chojo. They they can't just make everything about mind reading. And so you almost start to forget that that's actually Shin's deal. And his powers have advanced so much to like the mind command and stuff, and like mind reading their minute physical movements so that he can go like ultra instinct. You forget that the core of this character's power is that he can literally just hear what people are thinking. And this flashback, though, because he doesn't have any of these other strengths and his mind reading is the novelty, really leans into that again, which I find very entertaining. The latest chapter had their first kind of team battle where you get to see how Shin's mind reading power allied with Sakamoto's insane speed and reflexes and stuff. And it's like, yeah, like this kind of makes sense. Like we get to witness kind of the origin of this whole partnership and dynamic. I love too that they're having the cruise ship arc. I was just talking about my high expectations for a cruise ship arc. Already it's more interesting than Sid Craft because they really lean into what the physical experience of a cruise ship is. The fact that it's this bizarre kind of luxury town just floating on a boat. I like the fight scene in the little cabaret club, whatever that was, jazz hall thing where they smash the dude in the grand piano and then they start hammering on the keys so the hammers will hit him in the face. Perfect. Just the sort of thing I love from the series. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is like great that they're really going in depth with this whole Shin flashback. Again, it shows a lot of confidence. Other series are getting wiped out around the 200 chapter mark, but not Sakamoto. They're confident they can keep it going. New pillar of jump. So yeah, I hope they take their time with this. I hope this ends with like a realization on the part of Shin that then carries over to present day. You know, it's going to be something like that where he truly realizes he does not need to kill. And then that'll lead us probably right into the climax of the prison arc. And then what's after that? I don't know, but it's going to be great. I will give this an S-. Very, very solid stuff this month. Excited to see what's next. Now let's talk about RuriDragon. We got 2 chapters this month, both taking place at the long-awaited Sports Fest, which she literally moved heaven upon earth to make sure it happened, causing perhaps untold damage to other communities. This was nice stuff. I really like how focused and thorough they're being with this depiction of the Sports Fest. It's just a lot of fun. You can see why people enjoy it, why there's so much excitement. I was talking about this when I was talking about the Olympics in my Western TV video, that it's like, as a kid, I really did not enjoy the Sports Fest because I was very sickly and I just never wanted to participate. But now that I'm older, it's like, damn, man, I wish I could have liked those because it's actually such a cool idea. I mean, it's like, I think inherently there's always going to be kids that do not have a good time because they are unathletic or they're sickly or whatever. And that sucks. But I wish I had somehow been able to have a good time because it looks like a good time when it's a good time, if that makes sense. And it really showed Ruri's development, that she went from so reluctantly being on the Sports Fest Council to being a reliable, strong, dependable person. Emphasis on strong. I like that they showed off that because of her draconic powers, she can just trivially lift stuff like Mugi inexplicably can in K-On! Really fun. And then another kind of like, well, this was bound to happen type moment where huge groups of people in classes that don't typically see Ruri are now exposed to her because of the Sports Fest, and they get really excited because, wow, there really is a dragon girl. There's a girl with horns. And it's neat because it's like a retread of the problems, or not even the problems, but the situation Ruri was in at the start of the series, where she was a novelty. Nobody really knew how to deal with her. People kind of objectified her. They just wanted to see tricks. And now she's dealing with that again with this new group of people. But you can see how she's changed. You can see how she's dealing with it differently. Embracing aspects, cutting other aspects off in the bud. Yeah, fun stuff. Nice stuff. It's a happy time for the series. Which makes me wonder what'll happen next. We'll give it an A for the month. Next, let's talk about One Piece. And as I say every month, if you really want to hear me talk about One Piece, there's a good hour and a half of videos that came out in the last month, including earlier today, of me reacting page by page, panel by panel, to every chapter. We are still in the swing of the Elbaf arc, which has been too good for words. Wait, that's an odd thing to say when I put it into words at such length. Words still are insufficient to describe how much fun I'm having. It's a crazy slurry of intense events, twists, shockers, devastating moments, painful moments, then lore, revelations, more questions being asked than answered, but some answers nevertheless. And then just good old adventure, you know? I often say that my favorite part of One Piece is when it taps into that really pure sense of just being in a strange new place that's full of exciting things, and just kind of waging a path into trouble, which really, really came through in these chapters as well. Yeah, I don't know. I got all sorts of theories. I got all sorts of things to praise. But if you're watching this and you don't read One Piece, it would be huge spoilers. So, check out the standalone chapter videos. But needless to say, the series is in a really, really good spot for me. I'm just so excited by this whole arc. I just love the giants. I love the setting of Elbaf. It's getting an S+ for the month. Alright, let's talk about Nue's Exorcist. And you know what? It wasn't that bad this month. I think this is the most it has ever cooked. Maybe since like way back at the very start of the series when the genre was very different and it had some like kind of fun slice of life stuff. When I started reading this series, I actually had high hopes because I thought the art style was kind of neat and it seemed to be in a pretty interesting like emotional space. That was for like the first like 5 chapters. Now it's this. But look, this month started off with like an actual arc. It feels like for so long now we have just been in this weird flux of like constant training and constant fighting. Train, fight, train, fight, confession, train, fight, fan service, fight, train, fight. And it's like lore, train. And it's like, none of this really felt important, relative. It was all just like shit happening. There wasn't any feeling of like an arc in my mind because there wasn't like a period where things escalated and then climaxed and then resolved into the next arc, you know? You know, this structure, rising and falling action, the basis of all fiction writing throughout human history. There wasn't really anything of that. It was just kind of like shit happening all the time and way too many training arcs. Now we have an actual arc. Let's break into the mansion to rescue What's-Her-Face. That's like a thing. That's like a thing that was happening. Where there was like a setup where he goes to the mansion and he has to like sneak through. And it was like kind of cool. Because it wasn't just fucking fight scenes. Or training fight scenes. Or emotionally brain-dead confession scenes. I was like, whoa, it's like a real manga. I'm not just reading like a light novel. It feels like a manga. And then, of course, inevitably, he runs into somebody he has to fight. But even then, there's a lot more hope for me now because he's fighting somebody who's like their family guard. And he'll probably win this fight and then go and continue like infiltrating the castle and stuff and trying to find the girl. And there'll be like other fights. And you see it escalates. There's a rising action. It's not just like fighting the big boss for 12 chapters and then training to fight the next big boss for 12 chapters. But I will say that like, given that they've kind of stumbled into an actual arc structure and so far haven't like totally blown that yet, and it could be interesting and I have potential for it. The more minutia I feel like they are not equipped to do properly in that context. Okay, so let's break down what's happened with Gakko, or whatever his name is. He had a big training arc where he was training with this guy who ultimately betrayed him, and then he had this like intense, hard-fought victory where he just like barely wins. And that was also the result of like some secret training that was happening in parallel. Then he got like beaten up again by somebody who was like trying to stop him. That was very stupid and silly. But the point is, he's had his hard knocks, and then he's gotten back up. He's gotten stronger. He's more motivated and determined than ever. Okay? That's what we're going into this arc feeling like. He has been put in a position of heroism and resoluteness. So, why does the first fight he gets into, he just gets his ass whooped for like an entire chapter? And it's like, this guy's way too strong for you. Like, it's just such weird storytelling. There's no real sense of like a character arc because like he has such a moment of conviction and courage, and then he just gets his ass beat again. And now it's like in the latest chapter, they're like, he's so outclassed, but he's growing. Just within this fight, he's growing. Because he's going to win the fight, ultimately. So it's like, what? Why couldn't you just let him win? Couldn't this guy just job for once? Couldn't anybody job to him for once? Why is it that every single person he meets is like unfathomably stronger than him, and then he needs to like almost die and then come back? And I think it's like the author and this is kind of a light novel thing. The author is more addicted to that storytelling beat of the main character getting the absolute shit kicked out of him, and then triumphing, than they are in like an overall flow of the story and an overall flow of like how battle shonen works. Like, it just makes so much more sense to me that he runs into the guard, and the guard's like, I'm about as strong as Vice Captain whatever. And he's like, oh yeah? Well, you're not ready for how pissed off I am. Sweeps the floor. It's like, what's going to happen after this? Is he going to get healed again? I don't know, man. But I will say this. It's an actual arc. There's like things happening in plot. You know, they used to do this. There was other arcs. Like, remember the one where they're trying to infiltrate the like cabin out in the woods and stuff? It used to be more than just fight scenes. And there was a little bit more than just fight scenes this time. But the fight scenes were still like very confusing. But yeah, I'm gonna give this a C minus, which is the highest grade the series has got. It's the first time it broke into the C tier. I want more of this. I want, like, the series is not bad when they have like a story that they're telling. It's only when it's just this like nauseating rhythm of just train, 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 fight, 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 grope, 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 grope. Ugh. Okay. Let's talk about me and Roboco. Now here's a banger. Some very interesting chapters. An unprecedented level of sincerity in Roboco. Well, not unprecedented, because this does happen occasionally. But here we got like 2 back-to-back fairly sincere chapters. One about the magic of the slopes, where Bondo wants to appear cool while skiing. And mostly it's a very goofy chapter, but it ends with a very cute, sincere moment, which I think was meant to kind of ring in the new year. Here's some progress, if you want to call it that. Lovely, nice. And then a very strangely sincere chapter about an old woman who has this like archaic order maid that's at like the end of their service life and probably will need to get shut down, can't be fixed anymore, blah blah blah. And it's like really surprisingly sad. It has real moments of like cuteness and stuff. Roboco's involvement with the chapter herself is like not an agent of pure chaos for once, but she actually sincerely tries to do well by other people and help out this lady in this situation. She has this empathy for the older order maid and empathy for this old woman. And it's just like, what the heck am I reading? This feels like a chapter from Pluto. From Urasawa's Pluto. And it's crazy too, because the whole concept of the series is that it's a world where everybody has robotic maids, order maids. But the manga is very, very rarely about that. And then suddenly there were just like, after what, 217 chapters, they were like, let's tell a very human story about what the world would really be like on this human condition level if everybody had an order maid that they end up growing so fond of. Just like, what? It's great. I mean, I'm not complaining at all, but it's like, why'd you guys decide to do that all of a sudden? Like, what's going on here? I don't know. Maybe this is all a run up to the movie in some way. They're just really showing off the strength of the series in all different dimensions. I am very, very excited for the movie. I think the movie might be absolute insanity. I'm hoping it'll be really good. And then the latest chapter, much more typical Roboco fare. This idea that she's going to be in a documentary about her day-to-day life, and then of course she just lies about every single aspect of her day-to-day life to make her seem way more suffering and virtuous and whatever. It's fun. It's fun. Okay. Yeah, solid month for the series. We'll give it an A. May Roboco last forever. The new Kochikame. Chojo might want to be the new Kochikame because it's a cop series. Psh. This right here. That's our Ryusuke. It's Kochikame time. It's Kill Blue time. Really weird month for the series. It's kind of feeling like there's some editorial influence where it seems like the author kind of wanted to do a window of peace in the vein of Witch Watch, where there was kind of some crises and decisive action, and his disciple shows up, and there's the potential for kind of like something to happen. And then very deliberately, it was like, let's take big steps into irreverence. And we just had 2 purely comedic chapters, just kind of slice of life stuff involving the expanded cast. Really nothing of consequence, you know. And it wasn't bad either. Like, I don't think this series, its comedic heights are anywhere near like Witch Watch for me. But they do some stuff that I think is very clever, and I don't mind this mode of the series. And then it feels like they were gearing up for like a run of chapters like this, checking in on everybody, just enjoying these little slice of life antics. And then in this chapter, no. Hard veer to relevance, heading into what might be the conclusion of the entire series. It's kind of hard to imagine that that's the case because it's so abrupt, and there's definitely the sense that they wanted to do so many other things first. But, you know, that's typical Jump events. That's the sort of thing anybody can get told. Way more successful mangaka than this can be told that, hey, start wrapping it up. Your time has come. So yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine this not being the final climax either. There's kind of nothing left after this if things are actually going to unfold the way they appear to. And I don't know, it's kind of jarring. I didn't really appreciate that we are heading so immediately into a conclusion. But I do also think they've got some cards up their sleeves for this conclusion. I feel like one of the qualities of the series I like is that as much as it seems very meandering, as much as it doesn't really seem to know what genre it wants to be or what tone it wants to operate into, it does seem like the broad strokes of the plan for the plot were really planned out, and it feels like there's going to be some kind of last minute twists and some really major moments of catharsis and action climaxes and stuff. And I have some faith that all of that they've been cooking with, you know, the whole time. I'm still calling the twist is that Noren, is also an adult that got turned into a child in this experiment. To me, that seems like a pretty foreshadowed twist. Could also end then with Ogami and Noren both turning back into adults full time and getting together. It would still be a little weird, but I think that's kind of like the least weird major conclusion to that whole thing they can do. And then I really liked the villain's plan of like introducing guns into Japan, and I'm really hoping there's going to be some more development in that direction, or just more stuff with him. He just seems like a cool character. So I don't know. My hopes are high for what might be the final arc of the series. But getting there is kind of rough. It feels very abrupt, very stumbling. To go from a chapter where like a side character and an even more side character are like the main focal points, totally irreverent, nothing to do with the main plot, totally irrelevant too, which is the word I meant to say. To have that, and then the next chapter after that being like, we're taking out the big boss. I'm using my most powerful transformation yet. I'm turning myself into my physical prime. It's the final showdown. It's like, oh, what? Okay. All right. Let's talk about Kagurabachi. This whole thing with Samura's daughter, I think it's got very interesting elements. I like that it's kind of involving itself with like the real world. I think a unique strength that the series can play into is that all of the events we're seeing are just kind of playing out in the background of people's day-to-day lives, and the glimpses they get of it, this idea of like, oh yeah, Chihiro was on TV because he like murdered a bunch of people at a kabuki theater. It's just really interesting to me to kind of like highlight that sort of relationship, and I think this arc is doing that really well. I also like in the latest chapter Or actually, no, let's do a compliment sandwich. I like that aspect. The actual sword fighting and this arc of like Chihiro getting over his reliance on the enchanted blades and becoming like a good swords master in and of himself. I don't know, it's not doing a ton for me. Like the actual battle was kind of cool, and I like this idea of like the secret IA style that he observed Samura doing. And then he just has this sort of like inherent cheat code level mimicry where merely by witnessing swordsmanship technique he can execute it, which is like kind of funny to me that after like 60 chapters they're like, oh, and he can do this. But I guess, you know, that's the whole thing. You can't use the enchanted blade anymore, so he has to like start discovering what his actual swordsmanship powers are. It's all good, but I wouldn't say it's like great. It's just not like, I think it's like a little too smooth that it goes from like he can't use the enchanted blade anymore. Now he's just like your average mook. He's never even really studied swordsmanship. This kind of puts him at a disadvantage. They're like kind of bringing up all this stuff, and then very rapidly it's like, but actually, his magic eyes. He mastered the most secretest sword technique already, or he's in the process of mastering it, or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, it's like a little convenient. Like, you can tell they're kind of like trying to switch gears on the character a little bit, but it doesn't feel like it was adequately explored in Chihiro's feelings and stuff. But not that bad either. I think it's fine. It's very competent, and I get what the purpose of it is. I just think, you know, you can like lean into these emotional moments a little more. They don't just have to be functional. Like, there could have been more desperation in Chihiro. There could have been more of a sense of failure or loss. Like maybe the girl is actually in enemy hands for a while because he was just so soundly defeated or something. You know, something a little more definitive that makes it a little more triumphant when he unlocks this masterful ability. On the other hand, another thing I really did like, though, is the thematic overlap between Samura's daughter and Chihiro, where it's like, we gotta erase all of her memories for her own sake. She'll be too much of a target if she remembers who her father is. But she doesn't like that idea. It's very distressing to her, understandably, to know that you had a big chunk of your memories removed and then be told, oh, okay, well, it's becoming unstable, so we're just gonna have to remove even more memories and make you like giga forget. I found that very compelling. I thought that was like nicely conveyed as nightmarish as it would be, and just this feeling she has of like knowing she had a father, her saying, I can remember holding hands with someone. I thought all that stuff was really good, like really emotional, really evocative. And then Chihiro being like, nah, I get it, because I was in a similar situation. If they had wiped out my memories of my swordsmith father, I could have lived a normal life. I could have just been a typical human being, and I wouldn't have had to been in this entire mess. But then he concludes, no, the memories with my father are so precious. I do not wish that had happened. I'm glad that wasn't the scenario. And I was like, that's really cool. That's like good writing. And it feels kind of like 101 to be like, oh, if you have two characters that have gone through sort of a similar situation, but they're like on either sides of the situation, you should give them the space to have like a dialogue and for them to each kind of express where they were. And, you know, I went down path A and this is how it affected me. Well, I went down path B and this is how it affected me. But there's a lot of people that miss these opportunities in writing. It's like hard to notice in absence, but if you really like try to deconstruct some fairly popular stories, Harry Potter, and look for opportunities to have character growth and character arcs through this kind of relationship, it's often that the author seems to just kind of forget, oh wait, that character's backstory is actually kind of similar. And these opportunities just get missed. So I was like happy. I was it's a low bar, but they cleared it very well, to just have these characters relate to each other. It's like, yeah, this is good. This is interesting. And I just thought, yeah, the emotional resonance was good. Like, it really drove home what these scenarios were like for these people, and just this kind of greater theme of like Chihiro has gone so far he cannot go back to any sort of normal life. Not that he ever had a normal life to begin with. Like that this entire saga has made monsters out of people, that people have had to do things that they can't take back, that will haunt them forever. Some like interesting stuff, you know, these themes kind of being explored through this opportunity. Okay, well, what if you could forget about all of that? I don't know. It's interesting. They're kind of cooking. We'll give it an A- for the month. I think there's a lot of potential here, though. These next few chapters, I'm hoping they really blow my mind. Okay, let's talk about Ichi the Witch. You know, I was really enjoying this series. And I was enjoying it so much that I started kind of like projecting my own expectations onto it. And when they started this whole mushroom hunting arc, I had such a vision in mind of what it could be and the scale of it, and the fact that in my mind, okay, this is the time for adventure, my beloved adventure as quality. And so I was kind of disappointed when things escalated very rapidly and suddenly this like endgame level threat was there. And we had Descara fighting at like full power, and Ichi going into this like psychotic berserker hunter mode, and all these things that kind of felt like they should be saved. Things that I felt like this arc didn't need, that this arc could have been excellent as just sort of a fairly standalone adventure, and that it felt weirdly desperate and just kind of unnecessary and inappropriate to like throw in all of these rapidly escalating elements on top of my fun little mushroom hunting adventure. And I still kind of feel like that. I feel like this month was just full of kind of shock value. And it didn't really do a whole lot to kind of like make me that much more interested or invested in the world. It's just sort of like, oh, okay, yeah, here's like a really scary magic, and later they'll fight him because he's too strong right now. He beats a hasty retreat, but it's like, okay, whatever, we'll fight him later. It's not really that like enriching for me. It's just, okay, there's a strong dude out there. Sure. And it feels like they were more just kind of wanting to hint at what the higher power level fighting will look like, and how intense things will get, and the scale. Don't worry, it will get really catastrophic. It's not just going to be hunting for mushrooms. It's like, man, I just wanted to hunt for mushrooms. But there was still a lot of stuff I really like. I do like that they did back off fighting this guy. For a little bit there, I thought, oh my god, are they going to like beat him? Where the hell is this going? But it went in what I think is really the only sensible direction. Bad guy runs away. We save it for another day. And I did really like, too, this idea that when Ichi gets knocked out, he goes into kind of this phantasmal world in his inner mind where all of the magics he's acquired live. I think that's just like a very fun idea and really contributes to this like kind of monster catching aspect of the series, where all of the powers they acquire are accompanied by like a living magical creature that has like a personality and a design and stuff. I thought that was really fun, and I feel like that's something they can definitely expand on and revisit throughout the series. All that stuff is fun, and like the quality of the series in terms of just like the paneling and the art and the action and how cool everything looks and how awesome all the character designs are. All that stuff was still firing at 100%. So yeah, not the direction I thought it would go in. Really curious to see what will happen next. I mean, if they were just like, they got a note that was like, people need to understand the gravity of this series, you gotta show something crazy happening. Oh, okay. Box checked. Now let's have a lower stakes adventure. Now let's go mushroom hunting again. Or actually, Ichi lost the contest, right? It was the ice girl, Togais, who wiped out the mushroom magic. So now Ichi has to go to witch school. There we go. That's perfect. Let's have a witch school arc. I love a school arc. Let's do it. We'll give it an A for the month. Oh, Himaten. It's not like I had high hopes for this series, but it's just sort of like that feeling of like grim confirmation where it just keeps going in the direction that you expected, but were hoping to be surprised. What I've noticed too is that with these sorts of harem romances, certain girls become front runners in the fandom, that the fans just like them the most, and then without real consideration of like the plot or the actual character dynamics that they've established or anything like that, the mangaka really shifts gears to just insert that character more and more and more. And that's happening already. It's the Kana series now. Kana is everywhere. All 3 chapters this month had major Kana focus, major Kana fan service. It is what it is. We knew what we were getting into. Jump hasn't run a stupid fan service harem in a while, and here it is. And it honestly, it could still be worse. Like the fan service is like pretty blatant, but I would say it's not like rude. And the distinction I make there is like the fan service doesn't feel like it is at it's like humiliating for the characters. It's not like how do I put this? There was like the mishap era of fan service, right? Where the fan service resulted from the girl characters having a mishap, a wardrobe malfunction, or oh, I was changing in here, didn't so and so tell you? Ah, no, they didn't. Or, uh-oh, we're gonna get in trouble. I need to, like, hide with you under the blankets. Things that were, like, outside of the girl's control. Where part of the fan service, honestly, and this is kind of reflecting certain misogynist elements in culture, where that it's, like, more erotic and more thrilling because the girl didn't really want it, you know? Which is gross. It's very gross. And describing it like this in isolation, it really makes it apparent kind of how gross it was. But that was like the standard for these sorts of fan service rom-coms. That's where the fan service would come from. This, I really want to note, in a very deliberate twist, I don't know if it's the right word, but in a progression of the genre, almost all the fan service is entirely within the agency of the girls. It's like there are fashion models. She's getting bikini photos taken for a magazine. That's what we see. That's the fan service. She wants to dress up like a maid to reward the MC as a little, tantalizing treat for him. Now, are these things misogynist in their own way? The fact that a high school girl is a bikini model? Yes. The fact that maids are sexualized to this extent and that she's doing this as like an odd little bonus for him? Yeah, that's problematic in its own way. But I do like that it's all deliberate. That Kana is the one in charge and she's doing these things because she wants to. That's something. That's something. I don't know if this is damning by faint praise, but it is something that I wanted to point out. As this series bends further and further towards typical fan service harem rom-com, we'll see if it can keep up at least this more progressive interpretation of it. Okay, I gave it a B- for the month. It is what it is, and there'll be more of it. I don't know how well this series is doing. I mean, I would say compared to your fan service rom-coms of the past, the premise here is a lot more tame. And the fan service itself has actually been more tame, certainly than something like To Love Ru or anything else by Kenta Sensei. So I don't know. I don't know if it has the X factor to really get in front of people's minds. At the same time, there's like not really any competition in this genre right now in the magazine. So it might be able to just kind of coast on by with the pervs. Okay. Next, let's talk about HakuTaku. Interesting wrap up to this arc where they really wanted to get in front of the most gifted, talented game development in the world It felt like suddenly they were fighting the final boss, you know? It made me wonder maybe if the series was faltering. It was headed for the early 20 chapters grave, and they wanted to give an opportunity for like a big climax. Wow. Already I have been recognized by the most talented game developer in the world. Now my adventures continue out into the sunset. And it feels like maybe they were kind of hedging their bets, weighing their options going into this. But ultimately, they went for a much more realistic conclusion that I think still kind of accomplishes everything they'd want in terms of the series running for a while. Where, yeah, the people they showed off their game to they were impressed. But they also pointed out, very reasonably, oh, this game actually makes like no sense at scale. It cannot be a commercial product. The way you went about developing it is totally unsustainable, as impressive as it is. It's a very clever idea, but you aren't going to be able to make like a video game if this is your mentality. And it raised all of these questions of like, what is motivating them to make games? It's always kind of these ad hoc problem solutions that aren't really sustainable as games that don't actually create a product that can just sell on store shelves. And moreover, they don't really reflect what they actually want to do in terms of making games. It's always just in response to some specific situation, right? So I thought that was very interesting. I thought that really opened up the series nicely, that it felt like almost everything up until now was just sort of an intro. And now they're really on the mission. Now they really understand we need to make like a game. There was an interesting thing too in this week's chapter where the bully character from the very first chapter reappeared. Very strange dynamic with the MC. But I actually thought it was really cool. Like I was actually very impressed with that character's little arc that we only saw a couple glimpses of. The moment at the end where he at first is about to say, you should keep doing your best, and then he says, I'll keep doing my best, and just this kind of acknowledgement that even though he was bullying this kid, maybe he kind of envied him too. Really kind of interesting character stuff. And I kind of felt like, oh, okay, we're kind of wrapping up this sort of unresolved business. We're putting our characters into a place of kind of emotional security where they all are aligned and they don't have kind of immediate outstanding trauma that had just been brought up recently. Maybe some long-term trauma, you know. What's her face here? She's certainly got a strange past of some sort that we'll get into at some point, I'm sure. But at any rate, it's like, okay, I felt like they were signaling, now we will switch gears into game-making arc. And I'm very excited for that, because to me, that's where the real potential of the series lies, is in just a really passionate, exciting exploration of what goes into making a game. And that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I hope this next arc will focus on. But good stuff. We'll give it an A-. I think these were very interesting chapters. The character work is getting really interesting. And I just love how reasonably the whole let's present to the greatest dev team in the world, that ended in a really cool way. Let's talk about the Elusive Samurai. Really great chapters this month. The finale with Sadamune hitting Toki, this seemingly invincible person who very rapidly meets his downfall after this. It felt, you know, like the Lenin quote, there are decades where nothing happens and then weeks where decades happen. It feels like these chapters cover an era of real Japanese history where decades were happening. Major transitions all over the place. Another titular hasty retreat. But yeah, the wrap-up stuff with Sadamune, when they started getting really sentimental about it, when they looked at his kind of long arc of history, not just as kind of comic relief character, not just as villain, not just as freak with big bulging eyes, but kind of as like a human being, and taking a look at how they had humanized him over the course of the series. and then just kind of like how that butts up against his actual historical record. Really, really cool stuff, and something that I think really put a nice capstone on what felt like one of the more major eras of the entire series. After that, we had some interlude chapters, which is something the series has done a few times in between major arcs. Just kind of checking in on the world and making sure to depict all of the relevant actual historical events, like Toki's downfall and, oh, what's his name? The main villain of the entire series, his son, the events around that. Um, which is kind of neat. I feel like in those moments it really embraces this history textbook manga feeling. And then after all of that, some very interesting historic reckoning where this whole time we have a protagonist who, up until recently, was just a little kid. It was kind of incorrigible and a little scamp. But then the historic record shows he starts popping out a lot of kids around now. So it's like, okay, how do we reckon with that in the manga? How do we reckon his characterization? What needs to change? And I think they leaned into it very, very hard, which is funny and surprising. With this idea of like, yeah, he is a ladies' man. Everybody is fawning over him. And the narration just telling you, yeah, he had probably a lot of kids by a lot of different people around this time. He impregnated a lot of women. And of course, they're not going to show that in a kids' manga explicitly, but they really leaned into like, hey, maybe that's what's happening here. And then this whole idea that he's had like 3 love interests through the entire series, and just going like, well, maybe you should just be a polygamist. I think you should just marry all 3 of them. And it seems like that's the direction the series would go, which is just so bizarre. So bizarre. It really shows like this kind of historic morality is very, very different than the morality of today. And the narration talks about that as well. And it really kind of feels like they just had this challenge where in the actual historical record, we can say that yeah, this kid started pumping him out. How do we deal with that in our manga? I think it would have been perfectly reasonable to just be like, well, we skip it. We don't talk about that. But no, they leaned into this challenge and they handled it, I think, pretty masterfully. Like, it's a weird mix of like comedy and just kind of the strangeness of seeing him in this mode, seeing him in this light as like a womanizer, is very funny. But then it's kind of beautiful too, because it's like these cathartic moments at these long character arcs of these women that have harbored secret loves for him, that now he's finally acknowledging them. And even though it's in this crazy superfluous triple marriage way, I don't know, it's kind of refreshing that it's not judgmental about that it's like really exploring, is there anything inherently wrong with this? I don't know. It's all very interesting. We're gonna give it an A plus. I think it was really cooking this month. Just between one of, I think, the highlights of the entire series, the departure of Sadamune from the story, and then all of these other shenanigans. A real variety of stuff happening in the series right now. And I don't know where it's gonna go next, and I'm not gonna find out on Wikipedia. We will see. It does feel like the story is coming to a close, but who knows, man? Only history knows. All right, Blue Box, excellent this month. Excellent. We are in the meat of it. Basketball action. Chinatsu's potential final game as a high schooler, seeking her way into the Winter Cup, but her final opponent before qualification, Yumika, the girl that got her into basketball, a girl that had always outpaced her, that she had such a complex relationship with. The whole arc before of getting Yumika back into basketball, one of the highlights of the whole series, and then kind of seeing that payoff in this game. Really, really great stuff. I think this really plays to the series' strength, which is like blending very solid, very compelling sports action with psychology and character studies that are even more compelling, more interesting. And here it's kind of interesting because normally you get like the match, and then the character has introspection, and there's like kind of a revelation or something definitive, something achieved, and then the game ends with that kind of having come into effect. And you get one. Here we've gotten like 4. And they're coming from all angles. Stuff about revelations with her dad, revelations with her relationship, her revelations with her friendship with Yumika, her own self-actualization. Who does she feel like she is as a basketball player? Why did she practice so much? What does it mean to suddenly be able to reap the rewards of your practice? Like, how does that feel for such a committed athlete to know this is the result of my training? It's happening now. The payoff is now. All of this stuff, like chapter by chapter, just kind of coming at us. I was so impressed. I was so engaged. I was so compelled. At the same time, with every one, I was like, well, that's it. Now we see the complete picture of her persona, and we're ready to just watch her play. And then the next chapter, she's like, but that just makes me think of, who am I in the eyes of my boyfriend? You know, like, it just gets deeper and deeper. And every time I'm like, this seems excessive, but then by the end of the chapter, I was like, whoa, they're cooking. And then after all of that, in the latest chapter, it's like we're shifting gears now into Yumika's perspective. And now it's going to be Yumika's whole self-actualization and history with Chinatsu and history with basketball. Like, it doesn't even feel like we're close to over in this game yet. I don't know. It's all very exciting. I feel worried because it feels like they're throwing up a lot of flags that Chinatsu will lose, in my opinion. Where it's like she loses, but she is so satisfied that she doesn't even mind, and it's still like a happy ending. Which would be alright. And the big reason I feel like this is because it feels like they've played... At this point, it feels like they've got to have played almost every kind of card and perspective and revelation she can have about her basketball career. So it's like, okay, she gets to the Winter Cup. These games matter even more, really. This is where shit gets, like, really crazy. What is left? What are they going to depict during those matches? At the same time, it's like, I think that's probably going to be the case, and that won't be bad. I'm sure that will still be very cathartic. They'll be cheering on Yumika at the Winter Cup. But it's like, damn, I want to see her win. I really want to see her win. I just feel like she's earned it so much at this point. I want to see the big W. Even though losing, but still being satisfied, and her dad still coming to understand her better, and that love and that understanding not being conditional on her winning, you know, that would be a very satisfying arc. That feels like what's being set up. I just want to see her win anyways. Okay, we'll see what happens. I'll give it an S- for the month. It's really, really cooking. This is the stuff this series is best at. Let's talk about Astro Royale. Kicked off a tournament arc last month that they seem to have kind of speedrun through. They did a lot of the tournament arc cliches, you know, scoping out the rivals, all these different power factions being at play, all the different archetypes of like, oh, that's the favorite, that's the dark horse, that's somebody that's not even on anybody's radar. There's just running through all these tropes in a way that none of them were really all that compelling or interesting or novel. But they were all competent, and the pacing of it was pretty exciting. That I was like, all right, sweet. That guy's cool. That looks fun. Let's see some fights. Let's see how this all plans out. So they got me. Like, I was down for the tournament arc. And then it seemed like they were going to go into it with, like, a pretty healthy expanded pacing. That we got a whole chapter of just kind of the first round of our protagonist. Pretty good fight scene, very generic. Oh, what do you have? Flame powers. I can make flames that explode. No fucking way. That's crazy. You're telling me you can cause explosions? That's nuts, dude. I've never seen too far. But I don't know. It like kind of shocks me how uncreative they are with the powers in this series. It really feels like that is not Wakui Sensei's strength, and that he just kind of felt like obliged to do it because he was making a battle shonen. Okay, well they gotta have superpowers. What are their superpowers? Well, this guy punches really hard, and this guy has a shield, and this girl goes invisible. Oh, okay. So after that fight, though, it seems like things have escalated really suddenly, and with an intent to shock. I think that they blow up some of the stands and they attack the horrible people that are sponsoring this whole event. And it kind of feels like, oh, maybe we're done with the tournament arc already. It's not clear to me whether I'm supposed to take these events as, wow, shit just got real. It's not just going to be a tournament anymore. Now it's like an outright war. Or if that's somehow going to get glossed over and then we're going to go back to like one-on-one tournament fighting. We'll see. Either way is like fine. But if they do shift gears out of this tournament really quickly, it's going to come across as very strange to me because it clearly was set up like we're going to do a whole tournament arc, and then it might turn out to be like tournament chapter, which is just kind of embarrassing. But we'll see. Give it a B for the month. It's not doing bad. I think this is hitting its stride in some ways. I just wish they had like more ideas. Alright, let's talk about Akane-banashi. This was one of the craziest months in the whole series of Akane-banashi. Some of the most significant plot developments, some huge twists that I never ever would have bet on in a million years, and definitely something that is signifying the start of an entirely new story saga, on the level of being able to say, yeah, everything up until now was like part 1, and now we are getting into part 2, So what happened? We saw the conclusion of the flashback. We had Akane make a very definitive vow to Arakawa. And then, in what is surprisingly many cases of this, we went almost instantly from flashback to time skip. And now it's multiple years later, I think 3 years later, and Akane is living in Paris and performing Rakugo to the Parisian crowd. She dropped off the face of the earth in Japan. Everyone assumed that she just quit Rakugo in the aftermath of the Shiguma school dissolving. And I think probably people found that to be a real shame and a disappointment, but maybe not all that unreasonable, because she basically had to join the school of like her arch enemy, the guy that expelled her father. So it's kind of interesting. Like, it's a plot beat that I never would have guessed would happen. This idea of Akane disappearing off the face of the earth and people thinking that she quit Rakugo, and then her kind of fading into this semi-obscurity as just like a glimpse of a potential that never came to pass. I thought it did a good job kind of conveying those feelings around the people that stayed in Japan. The rest of the cast that was so shocked and devastated by Akane disappearing. It really kind of conveyed, I think, that sort of archetypal story of somebody that could have had it, somebody that felt like they had all the potential in the world and then just fell off the face of the earth. And then the relief of the Rakugo journalist when he sees Akane still performing Rakugo better than ever before, able to captivate French audiences despite these massive cultural gaps, despite the language gaps. I just thought that was really, really cool. Just like a really cool storytelling thing. And now I feel like, obviously Akane is going to come back to Japan soon. I really loved the line of, when will you be back in Japan? I already answered that question. Remember? I said, see you soon. And when she comes back to Japan, there's going to be such a cool new version of her character and how her character relates to the world. At once she's again a dark horse. She fell off the typical path of promotion. She canceled her Futsume promotional exam. Will she do it again? I don't know. What is her plan? How is she getting gigs? Who is she still buddies with? Who has kind of blocked her out because she also cut them out of their lives? We don't know. And it's kind of like an interesting position where for so long she was like this kind of underdog talent that kept growing and surprising people, living up to the namesake of her father, living up to her tutelage under Shiguma. But now it's like she's been remade into an outsider, remade into like a dark horse. At the same time, it's like she's definitely gotten better. And we don't even know how much better she's gotten. We don't even know what new things she's capable of, what kind of stories she's learned, what kind of styles she can move into that we've never seen her do before. So it's like it's created all of these potential surprises as well. That for the first time in the series, we're not totally one-on-one aligned with Akane. We are more in the perspective of the Rakugo journalist, at least for now. Akane is this mysterious element, and we have no idea what heights her potential could reach. So cool, dude. I'm really excited for the next little arc, her return to Japan. What is that situation like? And then I'm sure this is leading up to kind of the next major climactic moment will be her first performance back in Japan. And I am convinced that is going to be an amazing, amazing, amazing performance. All right, we're going to give it an S for the month. Really good stuff. Okay, let's wrap things up by talking about the two series that ended. The first one, Mission Yozakura Family, is a series that I've never really been all that fond of. I felt tonally it was kind of a mess. The power systems and the way they conveyed battles and stuff, I also kind of found a mess. The overall plot line and lore, maybe the most messy thing of all. Perhaps the most blatant example of like not either having the ambition or the opportunity to write very far ahead, leading to multiple total ass pulley feeling retcons and just really bizarre escalation. Like on 5 occasions, it feels like they finally beat the big bad guy, only for him to reveal I was actually just getting manipulated by the even bigger bad guy. And none of these are like irredeemable sins to me, but just in combination, they all just sort of compounded on each other to make the series feel just not that engaging to me. Nothing that ever really nabbed me, and I never really got into any of the characters all that much just because of these other storytelling flaws. So I never really felt all that emotionally compelled by the series either. And it's like when you strip all of that away, oh, and I didn't find it funny either. When you strip all of that away, what are you really left with? There's no, well, despite that, blah, 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 because none of the qualities I liked. And you can hear me complain about it in all of these videos going back month after month after month. But I'll say this. I didn't read this series for too long. I got caught up on it last year. So it's only been maybe about 7 or 8 months of reading it week by week. Despite that, and despite the fact that I wasn't a huge fan of anything that was happening, I found myself moved by the finale. I found myself going, I'm going to miss this ragtag family. I'm going to miss these lovable dorks. I'm going to miss all these wacky adventures. I think the finale really tapped into like charming elements of the series that barely appeared in the series itself. Like the final chapter having this really low stakes, silly mission of trying to find the wedding ring and the shenanigans at the supermarket and just all of this kind of family life stuff. I was like, nah, this stuff is nice. Where was it the whole time? But the thing is, I wasn't even thinking, where was it the whole time? I was just thinking, this is nice. And just that feeling of finality and sentimentality and having this wonderful prolonged goodbye to all the characters. Some really beautiful artwork, some really cathartic moments, people kind of finally saying their piece to one another. All these kind of relationships arriving at a harmonious, stable state. I don't know, it's lovely. I think this is like really how a finale for a long-running series should go. I have basically no notes. Even though the series itself was not a banger to me, I was able to be caught up in the spirit of the finale enough that I was like feeling like, damn, I'm really gonna miss this one. It's a crazy thing that they were able to pull that off. The whole time I was complaining, but now that it's over, I'm like, wasn't that bad? That's the power of a good finale. So yeah, again, nothing mind-blowing, nothing really all that interesting, but playing to its strengths, its actual strengths that went neglected for way too long of the series, and just sort of enjoying the characters, enjoying this idea of a wacky spy family that isn't Spy Family. The idea of spy action and covert ops that so quickly in the main series got replaced by just blah, attack, beam, disease beam, hacking beam, string beam, air beam. But actually going back to like the spy choreography and the Mission Impossible kind of shtick, it's like, man, this could have been good. It could have been good. It reminded me of the potential that the series had. So we'll give it a B+. I just think very, very solid ending. I don't really wish it kept going. I'm not really going to miss it, but I did enjoy the ending. Oh, I forgot they animate this. Shoot. Well, you can read, or you can watch me read the final chapter in another video that went up today. And I don't know if I really have a whole lot to say on top of that. Again, I've been talking for months now about how hurried this ending is and how disappointing that is, but at the same time, how it was able to then create such an insane blitz, the smorgasbord of just insane shit happening on every panel and like 80 plot points, all just barraging at you simultaneously, which is in fact very unique and very exciting in its own way, even if it is also incomprehensible and feels like a mere shred of what it ought to have been. And I felt like things kind of like slowed down into a major kind of climactic moment, that they were at least given the room for the very, very final events to breathe. And I think this really came through in the ending. We spent some time talking about the lore of the series, all of these mechanics that were such an integral part of what made the series so unique and so compelling. It's like, all right, well, let's see this through to the end. We've defeated God. Now we are in charge of making the rules of the world. And of course, the idea is that they somewhat accidentally create the real world. They arrive at all of the laws and stuff of seasons and the Earth's rotation and society and blah, blah, blah. Some of it seems kind of flimsy when they're like, let's get rid of war. And then somebody's like, well, maybe actually war is good. Come on now. Let's not be fucking libs about this, okay? We should probably get rid of war. But yeah, I don't know. It was a little strained, but I do kind of like this idea of like them arriving at the ideal world and that being the real world and everybody's negator powers being gone and then just living normal lives. It's all nice. It's all nice. And in the final chapter, I really appreciate that they took the time to show each and every one of their dozens and dozens of characters and tell you what they're doing now that their negator powers are gone. That just felt very, very caring for both the characters and the fans of the series, like a real victory lap to just kind of revisit everything, re-experience so many things that happened in the series. It really was a great series, and man, though, look at these character designs. Like, they're all on the cover. Who the fuck are these people? We barely got to see them. They were supposed to all have their own arcs. They were all supposed to have multi-phase fights. But yeah. It is what it is. This is a curse that befalls many, many, many Shonen Jump series. No matter how successful you are, no matter how far you make it, you can still be told, wrap this up. We'll look at the tier lists. I did want to take an opportunity to talk about like the magazine as a whole. We're hitting a really major transitional period. First, we had the ending of BNHA and JJK last year. Two of the most long-running series in the magazine, two of the most popular series in the magazine, meeting their ends. Oh, here, let's look at it. So this is the last tier list. This is the current tier list. Very, very strong month. Sweeps week. Sweeps month. It's real. Super, super top heavy. Let's see if they can keep the energy up. But yeah, so it's like those two major pillars fell. Okay? And then I think in response to that, I was just talking to a friend about this, and it was helpful to kind of articulate my thoughts around this. Because it seems like very commonly in Jump, there is like a major changing of the guard era. That it's not on like a strict timeline, and the causality of it is quite complex. But it does seem like there are major extinction events where a whole bunch of series, even long-running series, all start dropping like flies. And I think the reason for that is twofold. So let's take JJK as an example. JJK was like a major cultural phenomenon. One of the best-selling series that Jump has had in this millennium. Something that attracted a whole lot of fans that are probably not typical Jump readers, okay? So they probably had a increase in week-by-week readership that they attributed to JJK. Okay, so now JJK ends. What is going to happen to those readers? We can expect that a big chunk of them are going to depart the magazine. They're not going to be week-by-week readers anymore. They're not going to buy it or subscribe to it digitally. That's bad. Okay, well, how do we mitigate the effects of that? Well, first off, it's unlikely that even the big JJK fans that got into Jump reading JJK were only reading JJK. They were probably also reading some other series. And of course, all of this can be reflected in reader survey data and blah, blah, blah. They have a sense of these sorts of dynamics. So let's say that a lot of them are also reading Undead Unluck and Yozakura Family. Okay? So now, it's not only that the JJK fanbase has totally departed because the series is over, but it's like the number of fans of those series also probably dwindled very quickly if the readers of JJK wouldn't continue buying the magazine just to read these other series that they just kind of happen to be reading. So I think that can point to what we saw as like a decline in the fan bases of these series that led to them being told, okay, this is your final arc, get going. Yozakura Family, you can say, this was going to be the final arc either way. But don't fall for it. I'm sure if it was blowing up and it was a huge success and Jump was giving them the big thumbs up and green light, it would have been that Asa was controlled by somebody too. Asa would have died and then said, if only I had time to enact this master plan to stop the true evil, and then an even more shadowy, powerful figure would emerge from the smoke. It would have happened. But no, instead they were told this is the last arc. So I think that's one thing. It's that when a huge series ends, it pulls a demographic with it that in turn was being used to support some other series. And then some of those series get wrapped up as well. The other thing that I think happens is, let's say there were a big chunk of readers that only read JJK. I think this is probably the case, given just the type of popularity that series had. So now you have people that were buying the magazine week by week for JJK, and now they're just going to stop. That sucks. How do you get them back into reading Jump again? Well, the problem is, none of these series could have done it. Because if any of these series were compelling enough to keep them reading the magazine after JJK ended, they would have done so already. So you need fresh blood. You need something that will once again entice those audiences. You know they're out there. You know that they like JJK. So you need something to kind of like scoop them back in. And if you're going to try to introduce this fresh blood to the magazine, something needs to go. That's just the ironclad rule of Jump. They can only run so many series. And this again explains why these like massive extinction events happen. They need to clear out space to try to entice lost audiences. So basically it's kind of like a domino effect, that when one of these big pillars of Jump falls, it's almost inevitable that a lot gets taken out in its wake. And I think it's kind of a shame that some series get wrapped up before they're ready, like Undead Unluck, in service of this, or at least what I perceive to be in service of this. But it is kind of cool, too, that the magazine does really operate in eras. And I think there's other causal factors, too, my friend pointed out. Well, given that series often debut in batches, which is like a very deliberate thing they do, and we can kind of expect some series length to be more common than others, then it would also follow that there's kind of like mass extinction events just from those statistics. I think that's definitely a factor too. But all of this is to say is that it's just very neat to be in a position like me where I'm extremely autistic about Jump and I'm planning on reading it cover to cover, week by week, indefinitely. It's very exciting for me to think about all of the eras of Jump that I'm going to get to live through. All of the eras that I've already seen, reading it since like the 2000s, at least in part. I lived through the big three. I saw the end of Naruto and Bleach, and now I've seen the end of BNHA and JJK. And now I've seen the start of all these other series, and I'll get to see which ones of them make it, which really to become the next pillars. And then I'll get to see what happens when those pillars fall down. We're going to be here talking like this when One Piece ends. We're going to be here talking like this when Sakamoto Days ends. We're going to be here talking about this when Ichi the Witch, which barely just started, comes to a conclusion. And the landscape of Jump will be so different at that point. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that so exciting? Isn't life grand? Aren't we so blessed as dirty monolinguists to be able to read Jump like this every week? Thank you, Viz. Oh, that's so great. Okay, I'll see you in the next month. We might get some new series. It'll be exciting. See you then.